Today I'm in Holmfirth in West Yorkshire with retired detective Gary Heseltine. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now last time we spoke we were talking about your new magazine. Just tell us what stage it's at now, Gary.
Well, the first issue, it's a bi-monthly magazine. It's an online e-zine because the technology is there for tablets, smartphones, etc. People are happy now to read off the screen. I said originally it was going to be 84 pages, but I think now with the material I've got from all the columnists, it's probably going to be a 96-page colour bi-monthly magazine. The first issue will be out on the 25th of June. The website's fully up and running for subscription availability, so you can subscribe either bi-monthly or you take a yearly subscription. There's a special offer on at the moment.
Right, so this is UFOtruthmagazine.com is the website, and tell us the principle that the magazine is based on.
Well, the principle is that over the last 11 years of my research, I've gradually got to know pretty much all of the world's top researchers. I've been on many conference platforms with them, and there are various people I think are just world class and who I respect personally. So I've approached many of these people to act as either guest columnists or regular columnists for the magazine, and they've all agreed to be so. So I think I've now probably got the strongest lineup of accepted UFO researchers anywhere in the world.
Okay, and you can get yearly subscriptions from richplanet.net as well, which is there's an offer of I think it's £16 for
six issues for the price of 4.
Right.
But you want to be hurry, because after the 16th of June that offer expires,
right.
And then it'll be 6 issues for the price of 5,
right.
£20.
Right.
But still good value, something like 60p a day.
Right, so just list some of the columnists you've got.
Right, regular columnists, it's all around the world. You've got AJ Javar, Brazil, one of the top 5 I would say in the world. Roberto Panotti from Italy. You have got Bill Chalker from Australia. You've got Susan Hanson from New Zealand. You've also got Mary Rodwell as an experienced and one of the most respected people in that field. She's there. Pia Knudsen from Denmark. There's a whole host.
Right.
And
don't forget David Caton.
No, that's the foreign speakers.
The unsung hero of modern day ufology.
Absolutely. David Caton is there as one of my regular columnists. There's probably 7 or 8 of the top British ufologists there. Right. To name a few, yourself might be in that. Just crept in there into that qualification, but yeah, David Caton, and you're looking at Alan Foster, people like that. So there's a whole host, and then guest contributions are going to be by the likes of Steve Bassett, from Stanton Friedman, Robert Salas, a whole host of people. So you know, I've met with a very positive attitude. What makes the magazine, I think, different from any other UFO magazine is the fact that I'm in its mission statement, I set out to do something that, as far as I can see, has never been done before, which is basically saying that any money raised through subscriptions, either bi-monthly or yearly subscriptions, a third of the money to the magazine will be set aside, ring-fenced for UFO causes. Right. And initially that'll support British ufology, give us a funding mechanism that we need to have to set up decent venues, speakers, flight costs, etc, etc. Right. But in time I hope that if the magazine takes off in a big way worldwide, that it will create a fund so that, say, if MUFON want to do a forensic test on an animal mutilation, they can apply for a grant and we can either pay for all of it or some of it.
Right, okay. You mentioned Steve Bassett there, and yep. He has recently organised the citizens' hearings at the Washington DC Press Club. Now,
yep.
For those who don't
National
know,
Press Club, yeah.
Yeah, who Steve Bassett is, he's been campaigning for the US government to admit what it knows about UFOs to the public. He was involved in the original Disclosure Project conference in 2001, May 2001, and if you've never seen that, do look it up. Disclosure Project conference, May 2001, which was also at the Washington Press Club.
Yeah, it's the National Press Club, and it's just 2 blocks from the White House, and this is such a prestigious place that all the former presidents, Reagan, Gorbachev, visited, Nelson Mandela, have all spoken at the same place. Right. So this is a very well-known place.
Right, so this is 5 days of hearings organised by Steve Bassett. Now let's just touch on how he managed to set this up. Someone gave him $1.1 million.
That's what I was told. I think Steve for years and years has done incredibly well trying to get these conferences put together, but this was a little bit different, and then Steve would say that this wasn't a conference, this was a mock congressional hearing, because the idea was that if the politicians won't let us have a proper debate about the subject, we'll organise our own debate, as it were. So that's what it was. He approached what turned out to be a former senator who actually ran for the presidency in I think 2008, which was Mike Gravel, 5 former congressmen and women. They became what was called the panel of politicians, and it was set up like a courtroom, and people gave evidence, taking an oath, and under oath, like you were in a courtroom, to tell the truth about their testimony in front of this panel of politicians. And it was all done, and obviously being a detective for many years, police officer, I can say absolutely that they set it up perfectly, and it was very solemnly done. You know, people swore in the oath solemnly and gave their testimony like they would do in court. So it was as close to it as a proper hearing.
Now, they're all former senators, weren't they? So,
yeah.
And we need to also point out, I think, that they were all paid $25,000.
$20,000 each.
$20,000 each of the 1.1 million that Bassett had. Okay, so the intention was to raise the profile and get an actual hearing in Congress.
I think his original aim was to kind of embarrass the actual Congress, that they weren't open to open debate about the subject. So by doing this, what I think he hoped to achieve was that by the end of it, he was hoping that the panel of politicians would say, yeah, we support the call for full congressional hearings, which is what they did at the end of it. We'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah. So 5 days, 5 sort of
9 till 5.
Right.
About 40 witnesses and the top researchers.
So you had different sort of themes on each day. You had a nuclear panel who was talking
there was
about
a nuclear tampering panel, which was extremely powerful. One of the highlights of the week, for example, Captain Robert Salas, who was in the 1967 Maelstrom missile 1967, where he's in his bunker and basically gets a call from the topside guard saying that there's a UFO over his missile silo, and then 10 of his missiles shut down. Well, there were 4 people on that panel, all recounting similar events, 2 of which had never come forward before. Very powerful testimony to the reality of the UFO phenomenon. Right,
and we had other notable witnesses. Paul Hellyer, who was the ex-Defence Minister of Canada.
Yeah, former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada at one time as well.
Right, and he's written a book which covers some of the UFO subject, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he is obviously somebody of his political background. It's a bit of a coup when he came out a few years ago saying that he believed from his inquiries that there was an ET engagement with the Earth. Well, he basically said the same thing at the panel, but obviously because of his, you know, how many deputy prime ministers do you have, you're willing to go on camera and say that.
Right. Now, other notables were Richard Dolan, yourself. You spoke for 11 minutes?
Basically everybody was initially given 10 minutes to do a word-for-word presentation, which you were supposed to have timed and handed in. It didn't exactly work like that. You know, Peter Davenport, bless him, he was on my panel, but he spoke for 20 minutes, and he's obviously just carried on, and he completely forgot that. But by the by, everybody had an allocated time that each witness would be given an allocated time to give whatever testimony it was, and then once all the people on that session had given their testimony, which were 4 or 5 people, then there would be a Q&A session by the politicians who they could ask anybody on who'd given testimony.
Right, and we were talking about the press coverage earlier. Very little press coverage of this event.
I was very disappointed, or not surprised, but I was very disappointed that I didn't see any mainstream TV there. I mean, there were some mainstream articles. There'd been one in the Washington Post. There'd been various little pieces, and at the end of the week there was a very what people deemed as being quite an historic one in the New York Times, which was made it a serious issue, and it apparently in the New York Times has never ever done that, but that was at the end of the week.
Now, another notable name who was there is Stephen Greer, who hosted the original Disclosure Project conference, and in my eyes he's become quite a controversial character now, and I could spend a whole programme
he is a controversial
explaining why. And there were people who were invited who wouldn't turn up because he was there.
Well, I don't know all the political things behind, but yeah, I think it's fair to say that some people would not go who would have been excellent witnesses,
right.
But chose not to because of some of the people that were giving evidence, which is a shame.
Right, okay. Now, let's...
I mean, we can talk about the Sirius movie if you want.
Yeah.
I fundamentally would have to say, and I'd never met him before, but I met Steve Greer while I was there briefly, but he's a very charismatic speaker. He's a very good speaker when he wants, and he certainly knows a lot. And if what he says about patents being taken off the market, about free energy and things like that, that's an area where I think he's very powerful on. The Sirius movie was...
Right, let me just interrupt you there, Gary, straight up. My opinion of that is he's a...
Okay, I don't know enough about that, but that's how he comes across.
Okay.
He is a good speaker, whatever you think to him otherwise. But the Sirius movie aired a week before, and he trailed that for months, saying that he had absolutely conclusive proof that the little Atacama figure, humanoid figure, was in some way extraterrestrial, hybrid or whatever. And it turned out a week before that it wasn't. So I think, with the best will in the world, that wasn't good for the conference. No. Because anybody press-wise that were thinking, well, they really might have it, it kind of, I think, put a dead stop to them covering the citizens' hearing. Yeah,
just to expand on that, for those who aren't aware of this movie, you can watch it online still, I think. It's called Sirius, and it's about Stephen Greer sort of going through various cases in the UFO phenomenon, but throughout this documentary he's presenting this little
6-inch
being,
which turns out to be, it is if from what I can gather, it still is very bizarre, but it doesn't turn out to be extraterrestrial. It turns out to be a very strange 6 to 8 year old 6-inch
and it has
child. Not a child.
In the documentary they state categorically that it's got human mitochondria DNA, and I think
there's a missing 9% that they count of.
Right.
They're still doing further research.
Right, okay, but it looks like it's probably human. So my question is, why didn't they use Lloyd Pye's evidence?
Absolutely, I agree. I think Lloyd Pye has got a fantastic case there.
Yeah, he seems to have, assuming that his DNA results are all genuine and we can corroborate them and repeat them.
That appears to be the strongest.
Yeah, that looks like the
ancient alien, as it were.
The skull that he has.
Absolutely.
Isn't human, assuming all of his results are correct. So,
absolutely.
So why did Greer put that in? That's the question I would ask. I would have completely left that out of the documentary, because all it's doing is
the documentary tried to do 3 things,
and
you can't do that. But it should have featured on one. He talked about technology, he talked about the UFO cover-up, and then he talked about the alien body, the Atacama body. And then it should have been just one of those 3 things. So it was fundamentally flawed for me.
Let me just make one other comment about Stephen Greer. His 2001 conference was absolutely fantastic, I thought.
The basic idea of disclosure is incredible, but that was just a 2-hour conference. It'd never been done before, and there was a whole host of mainstream cameras there. Unfortunately, what some people will say is that some of the people that's involved in giving testimony aren't as vetted as what they should be.
Right.
I think that's the key.
Okay. Now, another person who spoke at the conference was our old friend, Nick Pope.
Nick Pope, bless him. Bless him.
Just.
Do you want to? I'll give you a Nick Pope moment. Right, a Nick Pope moment. He was on a couple of panels discussion before the politicians, and on one of them he was speaking, surprisingly I thought, about countries, and he was on there from the UK. Now, basically, he's never said anything, I think, really positive about the UK, but he was on the panel. That's by the by. But what was interesting is that in the morning, there'd been a session with pilots, and one of the, and some of the testimony from the pilots, in particular, there was one called Colonel Oscar Santa Maria from Peru, who basically was flying a jet to a radar confirmed UFO in daylight, and he comes across what he thinks is a balloon just hovering motionless, and he's told to destroy it. So he actually lets go of 64 rounds at this, thinking it's going to explode as a balloon, but it doesn't. There's no effect, and then suddenly this object starts moving away at weird and wonderful angles, and he goes into a pursuit for 80 minutes. What I'm getting to is the fact that that testimony by this first-hand pilot absolutely had the politicians jaw-dropping. And one of the former congressman, Merrill Cook, who'd been, I think, fairly sceptical throughout the week. This is the Thursday of the week, so 4 days in. His jaw was literally on the floor. His body language, his jaw was on the floor as he was hearing this. And then in the afternoon, Nick came on talking about UFOs and in Britain and whatever. And Merrill Cook actually said to Nick Pope, he says, well, Nick, you've retired from the MOD. You can speak freely. What do you think about the ET phenomenon? And paraphrasing, he basically said, well, I'm not quite convinced yet.
I'm not quite there yet.
I'm not quite there yet, and I suppose that's a funny way of saying I don't know. And Merrill Cook, if you were in the room, his face was a picture, because he's thinking, well, you've been doing this for 17 years. If you don't know now, you never will. And Merrill Cook was absolutely blown away by the testimony in the morning. So it doesn't add up. So you know, that's Nick being Nick, but I don't understand it.
It's Nick following his rules of engagement that are defined by his masters.
Well, maybe.
All right then, join us after this. Excellent. Right, I hope that was all recorded. Yeah.